A couple of videos back, we looked at the greatest starting 5 drafted by every team. If you haven't checked out that one, I'll link in the description. But now we're looking at the best current player drafted from every team. Doesn't matter what team they're on now, we're just basing it off of which team made the original pick for that player and seeing where they've wound up. And for some fans of certain teams, this is going to be okay. But for others, this one might hurt to watch, because I'm sure there's still a lot of pain and regrets in some of these. But before we go any further, I want to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, Drippy Locker, who offers the drippiest basketball shorts on the planet. They're a great site that offers every NBA team's team shorts. They're extremely high quality, super detailed, and come with 2 front pockets and 2 back zipper pockets. Also, I should mention when ordering, always order a size down for a more snug fit. And once you do that, they got super fast shipping and processing, so you can get your shorts right away. But here's the thing, with my promo code SWEAT, you'll save 60% off your order. That's the biggest promo code I've ever shared with you guys. And it sounds great, but make sure you do it soon because it's a limited time only thing and they're going quick. So get them while you can using the top link in my description, then my promo code SWEAT for 60% off. Now back to the video. Originally, the Portland Trailblazers drafted Damian Lillard. He's obviously currently their best by far and they still got him. At least for now though. I mean, if they don't make some drastic changes and do something quick, we might not be able to say that for too much longer. The best the Knicks drafted though was Kristaps Porzingis, and due to the way things ended with him in New York, with how good he was while he was there, and with what they got in return for him, I know this one still gotta hurt. Maybe not as much seeing how bad he's been for the Mavericks, but based on what Kristaps came out and said after the playoffs, it may have been Rick Carlisle's fault and not his that he hasn't been as involved on the team, so we'll see. For the Boston Celtics, they've drafted both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum with picks they got from that Brooklyn Nets trade. They've managed to keep both and looks like they're gonna for a long time to come. Jason's obviously the better of the two and one of the better players that they've ever drafted. The San Antonio Spurs have drafted a lot of great players throughout their history, but at least out of current day players, they don't have the best that they picked in Goran Dragic. I think in a couple years, DeJounte Murray could and will take the spot, who they do have, but for Goran's playoff experience and effectiveness, he takes it. And San Antonio never even gave him a chance because they drafted him in 2008, then instantly traded him to the Suns. But it's fine, they had Tony Parker at the time, so it makes sense. Then obviously the Hawks' best is Luka Doncic and the Mavs' best is Trae Young. Each team made the original picks, then traded for each other. And obviously nobody in the league today even competes for either of their spots. For the Rockets though, their spot was a little bit harder to decide. They haven't drafted any stars, but they have picked up a lot of talented role players the past few years, none of which they kept or currently have on the roster, which must hurt. But they've drafted Clint Capella, Marcus Morris, Dylan Brooks, and Montrezl Harrell. And man, this one's tough. But right now, right this minute, I'd probably give this one to Dylan Brooks. I want to say Capella, but after the way Brooks played against the Utah Jazz on both ends, he had to take this one. And that's tough for the Houston Rockets, who got him in the second round and traded him immediately after. The OKC Thunder's best is then obviously Kevin Durant, who's been unstoppable lately and takes the spot slightly over James Harden and over Russell Westbrook. Nothing needs to be said, nobody else is even close, but I will say though, OKC's drafted a lot of great players over the past 10 years alone. We do have some controversy though in Memphis. I'm giving the spot to Mike Conley, who played there for most of his NBA career, but they've also drafted Kyle Lowry and Ja Morant. Now I get a lot of people would give this to Ja. He averaged much better numbers in the regular season and 30 a game against the Jazz and Conley in the playoffs, but Mike's game right now is still more well-rounded, composed, and built for winning games. And Morant just isn't there yet. He knows how to put up numbers, but Conley's figured out how to help his team get wins. So Morant can take this one soon, but had to give it to Mike for now. The Sacramento Kings have a complicated history with the NBA draft. They've drafted 2 stars that fell to injury in Isaiah Thomas and DeMarcus Cousins, traded a couple good picks, and ended up with De'Aaron Fox as their best draft pick, who they still surprisingly have. Still haven't done anything with him, but they still got him. And being a bad team hasn't paid off for them as much as it has for the New Orleans Pelicans, who've lended Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, and Zion Williamson, who are all still current day players. They only have Zion left, but they got some good years from the other two. And currently at this moment in time, Chris Paul takes the spot as the best player they've drafted. The Bucks spot then clearly goes to Giannis, no questions asked, but it's a little more complicated for the Bulls spot because they've drafted both Jimmy Butler and Derrick Rose. At his peak, obviously it'd go to Rose, but if we're talking right now currently, it's a little more up for debate. Butler was pretty bad this postseason, while Derrick rallied an entire team and looked like his old self. I'd still slightly give this one to Butler though, even though it could go either way, and I can't really decide on it. The real loser in all this though is Chicago, who doesn't have either of them anymore. The Cavs also don't have either of their former top top stars in Kyrie Irving or LeBron James, who's Cleveland's best. But with the previously mentioned Jimmy Butler on the Heat now, he's playing with their top current day draft pick in Bam Adebayo. I kinda wanted to give this one to Bojan Bogdanovic though, but I won't. I'll keep it as Bam, even though he had a really weird year and lost a lot of his hype, but he's still got a ton of potential and hopefully more big things to come from him. For the Orlando Magic, best overall career would go to Dwight Howard, but best out of current day players easily goes to Domantas Sabonis, who's really broken out this past year. He was originally picked by the Magic, then traded right away in a deal, which has turned out as one of the worst mistakes of the entire 2000s. But Sabonis is great, even though I think he's really still more of a second option. And even though that was bad, overall very few teams have had as many mistakes with their top draft picks as the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've drafted a lot of talent, and usually the spot would go to Karl Anthony Towns, who they have, but I think this time it goes to Zach LaVine, who they traded away years ago. LaVine's only getting better and Towns' game is only getting worse. It's just hard to watch Minnesota make so many mistakes year after year, trading LaVine and Lowry and picking Anthony Edwards. Then LaMelo Ball comes out as the better player and wins Rookie of the Year. The Wizards spot easily goes to a guy like Bradley Beal, who somehow they still have. But as for the LA Lakers, they went through a stretch where they drafted a lot of young guys with a lot of potential, none of which that they have now, but it was guys like D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and my pick for current day best in Julius Randle. That may be a little in question after this terrible postseason for him, but we're gonna assume and hope that it was just because it was his first. Staying in LA though, for the Clippers, the options are tough. I mean, it's either Eric Gordon or Blake Griffin, and since Blake's a fourth option that sometimes puts up 20 a game and others puts up 2 a game, we gotta give it to Gordon, who's still great on both ends. Steph Curry obviously takes the Warriors spot, which doesn't even need anything said about it. Devin Booker takes the spot for the Suns, moving on. But now onto the Jazz, who really have been terrible in the draft over the last 10 to 15 years. In terms of original picks, they've really had no one exciting except for Gordon Hayward, who's still playing pretty good these days. And it's pretty crazy that they've directly drafted no one great that's even been an all-star in 15 years, but they still had the team with the best record in the NBA through great trades and signings. For the Nuggets, it obviously goes to Nicole Yokic, who wasn't drafted until the second round and has now become MVP of the league, probably making him the biggest draft steal of all time. And due to the Pistons draft luck/skill, they're another team that's been terrible in the grand scheme of things. Their best pick in the past 27 years has been Chris Middleton, who they traded away after 1 season. They've had 7 top 10 picks since then and haven't ever gotten much in return, which is why they're always either a team in the middle of the road or much worse. On the other hand though, the Philadelphia 76ers had that stretch during the process where they were getting all the top picks. They had a lot of busts with Okafor, Noel, and Fultz, but they did get Simmons and Embiid out of it, which made it worth it. And of course, Embiid is by far the best player. I want to see him healthy for a full season next year though, so he can really keep that MVP race interesting. Then the Brooklyn Nets got the best team in the NBA, even though at one point they traded almost every single one of their draft picks, and the best player they've gotten through the draft recently is only Jarrett Allen. Allen's not necessarily progressing as well as a lot of people thought he would, which makes it a good thing that Brooklyn ended up trading him when they did. The Indiana Pacers are next, and oddly enough, they drafted both of the Clippers' top 2 current players, which is odd and must really hurt if you're a Pacers fan. Picking Kawhi and trading him on draft night was one that already hurt for years, and losing out on Paul George in free agency just wasn't any better. It just makes you think the Pacers could have had this duo had they made the right choices. For the Charlotte Hornets, they may be the worst team in the draft ever, with all the mistakes they've made and draft busts that they've picked. So it's easy to say, but we still gotta give it to them. They've drafted Kemba Walker, Tobias Harris, and LaMelo Ball. I think soon LaMelo will take over this spot, but for the next couple of years at least, it's gonna stay as Kemba Walker's spot. Then finally, last up, the Toronto Raptors have selected both DeMar DeRozan and Pascal Siakam in the past. And Siakam had a terrible year this year, took a huge step back from where he was supposed to be and from the player people thought he was going to become. But I'd still give it to him over DeMar DeRozan, who's now on the backside of his career. If you enjoyed the video, come and let me know, and I'll catch you next time.